You've been lied to your entire life. They told you laziness is a character flaw, a moral failure, something broken inside you. But here's what nobody in your life has the courage to say. You are not lazy. Your brain is just waiting for a reason powerful enough to move. Think about it. You can binge an entire series in one sitting. You can stay up until 4 in the morning doing something you love. You can push through exhaustion when something truly matters. So the problem was never energy. The problem was never discipline. Purpose drives everything. The problem is that you've been trying to run a machine without fuel. And that fuel is not motivation. It's not willpower. It's something far more primal, far more terrifying than any self-help book will ever admit. Today, we're going to dig 5 layers deep into your psychology, past the excuses, past the habits, past the surface, until we hit the raw nerve that actually makes human beings move. And when we get there, you might not like what you find. But it will change everything. The laziness lie. Let's start by destroying a myth. The concept of laziness as we understand it today is barely 200 years old. Before the Industrial Revolution, nobody called a farmer lazy for resting after harvest. Nobody called a philosopher lazy for sitting and thinking. The word lazy was weaponized when factory owners needed bodies at machines for 14 hours a day. If you weren't producing, you were lazy. And that definition stuck. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. But Seneca wasn't talking about productivity. He was talking about living without purpose. There's a massive difference. Psychologist Devin Price, in their research on what they call the laziness lie, found that what we label as laziness is almost always one of 3 things: fear, exhaustion, or a lack of meaning, not a character defect, a signal. Your body refusing to move isn't broken, it's intelligent. Your inaction is not a flaw. It is your psyche screaming for something worth fighting for. Think about the last time you couldn't get off the couch. Were you truly unable, or did nothing in front of you feel worth the effort? That distinction changes everything. And it leads us to a question most people are terrified to ask themselves. The 5 whys. There's a technique Toyota engineers developed called the 5 whys. When a machine breaks, you ask why. Then you ask why again and again, 5 times, until you reach the root cause. Now apply that to yourself. Why do you want to succeed? Because I want money. Why do you want money? Because I want security. Why do you want security? Because I'm afraid. Why are you afraid? Because I don't want to be forgotten. Forgotten. And there it is. Beneath every ambition, every goal, every dream you've ever had, there's a terrifying truth hiding. You are afraid of being nobody, of living and dying without making a single dent in the universe. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Nietzsche understood this over a century ago. The how, the discipline, the habits, the morning routines, none of it matters without the why, and your why isn't positive. It isn't a vision board or an affirmation. Your deepest why is forged in fear, in the existential terror of insignificance. If this is making you uncomfortable right now, good. Hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of your psyche with me. Because what comes next explains why that discomfort is the most valuable thing you'll ever feel. Fear as fuel. Here's what every motivational speaker gets wrong. They tell you to overcome your fear, to push past it, to leave it behind. But what if fear was never the enemy? What if it was the engine? Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust. He lost his wife, his parents, his brother. He was stripped of everything that made him human. And in those concentration camps, he discovered something that rewrote psychology forever. The prisoners who survived weren't the strongest or the healthiest. They were the ones who had a reason to live, a book to finish, a child to find, a truth to share. Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. Frankl observed that purpose didn't eliminate suffering, it transformed it. And the source of that purpose, it wasn't joy, it wasn't hope in the traditional sense. It was the raw, primal terror of dying without meaning. Fear becomes fuel. Your fear of being insignificant isn't a weakness. It's evolution's most powerful motivational system. Every great achievement in human history was born not from comfort, but from someone who was absolutely terrified of leaving nothing behind. The question isn't how to eliminate fear. The question is whether you'll let it paralyze you or propel you. Pain's secret. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, really uncomfortable, because I need you to understand something that contradicts everything modern culture tells you. Pain is the single greatest motivator of change in the human brain. Not pleasure, not reward. Pain. Dr. Anna Lemke, a Stanford psychiatrist and author of Dopamine Nation, has shown that the human brain operates on a pleasure-pain balance. When you flood yourself with easy pleasure, scrolling social media, binge eating, numbing yourself with entertainment, your brain tips the scale. And it compensates by creating more pain, more anxiety, more emptiness, more of what you call laziness. But when you voluntarily embrace discomfort, something extraordinary happens. Your brain releases dopamine not during the suffering, but after. The relief becomes the reward, the struggle becomes the meaning. This is why you feel alive after a hard workout but dead inside after 6 hours of scrolling. Your comfort zone is slowly killing your motivation. The very things you do to avoid pain are manufacturing the emptiness you're trying to escape. And until you understand this loop, you'll keep calling yourself lazy while your brain is actually drowning in painless numbness. Sisyphus Reborn. Albert Camus wrote about a man named Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a mountain for eternity. Every time he reaches the top, the boulder rolls back down, and he walks back down to push it again. Forever. Most people read this as a tragedy. Camus saw it as a triumph. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why happy? Because Sisyphus found meaning in the pushing, not in reaching the top, not in the destination. In the daily, repetitive, exhausting act of doing the work. The push is the point. And this is the psychological key most people miss about motivation. You're not supposed to reach a point where effort becomes unnecessary. You're not supposed to arrive at a place where everything is easy and you never struggle again. That place doesn't exist. The struggle is the meaning. Every morning you get up and choose to push your boulder, whether that's your work, your art, your relationships, your growth, you're not suffering pointlessly. You're building the only thing that actually makes a human life feel significant: purpose through action. The boulder never stays at the top, and that is exactly why pushing it matters. But most people quit before they realize this. They think the effort should stop at some point, and when it doesn't, they collapse. Why you quit? So if struggle creates meaning, why do so many people quit? Why do you quit? Expectations. Psychologists call it the expectation gap. You start a new project, a new habit, a new chapter of your life, and in your mind you've already imagined the result, the body, the business, the relationship, the feeling, but reality doesn't match the fantasy. The gap between where you are and where you thought you'd be creates frustration. And frustration, when it has no purpose attached to it, feels like failure. 1. You set an unrealistic timeline. 2. Reality falls short of fantasy. 3. Frustration feels like failure. 4. You label yourself lazy and quit. This is the cycle, and notice what's happening. You're not quitting because the task is too hard. You're quitting because you lost connection to your why. The moment the struggle stopped feeling meaningful, your brain shut down motivation. It said, this isn't worth the pain. No reason, no movement. You didn't become lazy, you became disconnected, and the cure isn't another productivity system. It's not a new planner or a morning routine. It's reconnecting to the fear, the need, the primal drive that made you start in the first place. But how? That brings us to something most people will never understand about suffering. Suffering as bliss. This is going to sound insane, but stay with me. Suffering with purpose doesn't feel like suffering, it feels like meaning. Think about athletes, marathon runners. Their bodies are screaming in agony, their lungs are burning, every cell is begging them to stop. And yet when they cross that finish line, they describe it as the greatest feeling of their lives. Were they not suffering? Of course they were, but the suffering had a destination, a purpose, a why. To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Nietzsche wasn't being pessimistic, he was describing the fundamental architecture of human psychology. Your brain doesn't actually want comfort, it wants meaning, and meaning almost always requires sacrifice. The suffering you avoid is the exact fuel your psychology needs to transform. Look at every person you admire, every leader, every creator, every person who built something that mattered. They didn't avoid suffering, they chose it deliberately. They attached it to something bigger than themselves. The pain became fuel, the struggle became identity, the discomfort became proof that they were alive and building something real. This isn't philosophy, this is neuroscience, and it explains why you feel most alive when things are hardest. Dopamine trap. But here's the paradox. If struggle creates meaning and meaning creates motivation, why is an entire generation more paralyzed than ever? Dopamine is hijacked. Your ancestors struggled to find food, shelter, survival. Their brains rewarded every small victory with dopamine because those victories kept them alive. You get that same dopamine hit from a notification on your phone, from a like on your post, from the next episode auto-playing. Your brain can't tell the difference between earned dopamine and stolen dopamine. Your brain rewards scrolling the same way it would reward hunting a meal. Dr. Andrew Huberman's research at Stanford confirms that constant low-effort dopamine spikes actually destroy your capacity for motivation. Your baseline drops, things that should excite you feel boring, goals that should drive you feel pointless, and you sit there thinking you're lazy. You're not lazy, you're dopamine bankrupt. You've spent all your motivation currency on things that cost nothing and mean nothing. And now, when something real, something meaningful, something difficult appears, your brain says no, not because it can't, because it's already been spent on empty calories. The solution isn't more willpower, it's strategic deprivation, but that requires understanding one final piece of this puzzle: building your why. So how do you actually find your reason? How do you build a why powerful enough to override every excuse, every distraction, every comfortable lie your brain tells you? Honesty. It starts with radical honesty, not the inspirational poster kind, the terrifying kind. Sit with yourself, no phone, no music, no distractions, and ask, what am I genuinely afraid of? Not what you want, what you fear. Because your deepest motivation doesn't come from desire. It comes from the thing you cannot bear to let happen. 1. Remove all distractions for 30 minutes. 2. Ask yourself what terrifies you about your future. 3. Write the answer without filtering it. 4. That fear is your fuel, not your enemy. For some people, it's dying without creating anything. For others, it's proving someone wrong. For others still, it's making sure their children never experience what they did. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Your reason doesn't need to be noble. It doesn't need to look good on a motivational poster. Raw, honest, powerful. It needs to be honest, brutally, uncomfortably, undeniably honest, because a fake why produces fake motivation, and fake motivation is what you've been running on. That's why it keeps running out. The real why, the one forged in fear and honesty, never runs dry, because existential terror doesn't have an off switch. The real you. Let me tell you something about the person you actually are, not the lazy version, not the procrastinating version, not the version that can't seem to get it together. That version doesn't exist. There is no lazy version of you, only a disconnected one. The real you is the one who stayed up all night working on something that mattered, the one who moved mountains when someone they loved needed help, the one who found energy from nowhere when the stakes were high enough. That's not a different person. That's you with a reason. And the beautiful, terrifying truth is this: you're not broken, you're not flawed, you don't need fixing, you need igniting. You need to stop running from the fear of insignificance and start using it. Let it burn, let it keep you up at night. Let it make you uncomfortable in your comfort, because that discomfort, that restless feeling that something isn't enough, that is the most human thing about you. It means you still care. It means somewhere deep inside, you know you were built for more. And the only question left is whether you'll find the courage to admit what you're really afraid of and let that fear carry you forward. So here's what we've uncovered today. You're not lazy, you never were. Laziness is a label invented by people who needed you to produce without purpose. The truth is your brain is the most sophisticated motivational machine on the planet. It just refuses to waste energy on things that don't matter, and that's not a bug, that's a feature. Fear plus purpose equals power. The fear of being nobody, of making no difference, of living and dying in silence, that fear is your greatest gift, not because it feels good, but because it never lets you settle. It never lets you be truly comfortable with mediocrity. And the suffering you'll face when you finally pursue something meaningful, it won't feel like pain. It will feel like the most alive you've ever been. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Push your boulder, not because you have to, because it's the pushing that makes you who you are. If you made it this far, comment reason found if you finally understand why you've been stuck. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this changed how you see yourself, share it with someone who calls themselves lazy. Subscribe for more. See you in the next video.